This is No Hate Radio.
I'm no stranger to the rain. Oh, no. I'm no stranger to the rain.
Welcome to today's session of No Hate Radio. We're recording it right here in St. Petersburg, Florida, where we always originate our broadcast. Session's being recorded on July 30th, 2024, as the presidential and congressional elections, as well as many state and local elections, are less than 100 days away today. And boy, have things changed. Thanks for joining us as we continue our series on the political landscape in America. In our previous session, the discussion centered on the U.S. Supreme Court, both historically and currently. One of the themes was the lasting impact and very significant effect that decisions of the U.S. Supreme Court have not only on the structure of American government, but the very lives of citizens every day, as well as the dramatic change in the level of political partisanship and rancor that has invaded the selection process in the Senate, as contrasted with the historical process, which was largely based on recommendations within the professions and other matters. The political landscape is rapidly changing as the election season goes into home stretch. As has been often said in politics, 2 weeks can be a lifetime. 2024 is certainly an example of that. We've seen an assassination attempt on one candidate. The incumbent has dropped out of the race and passed the torch to a younger generation, an event which has only occurred once before in the history of America. One vice presidential choice has been made and another is to be made very soon. This year brings a woman of color to the presidential race as a very divided America looks on. It seems that very little is certain or predictable. The fact is that most certain thing in the political landscape today is that there is a vastly different view of the future of America and how to get there. Probably the only thing that's certain in the political landscape today. The issues have been the grist, the media mill, whether news media or social media, for a while, and they've reached a fever pitch as the culture wars rage here and around the world. Hot buttons are everywhere. Abortion, gun rights, immigration, race, public and higher education issues, environmental policy, isolationism, America First, NATO, and armed conflicts around the world. Today, the plan here on No Hate Radio is to introduce and begin the discussion of the position and view of one side of this debate on the future of America, as very specifically outlined in a document that was entitled Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise. It's more often referred to as Project 2025. It's referenced by its authors as a presidential transition project. And you'll no doubt hear Project 2025 discussed at length on cable news, talk radio and TV, and elsewhere. It's not our goal here on No Hate Radio to engage in the kind of detailed and specific point debate that will likely occur in the media world and political races, but it is our goal to at least provide a basic framework for understanding Project 2025 and the ideas and goals that it proposes as the correct path for America to take going forward. Now, I believe that an integral part of understanding most any document of this type is learning whose ideas are included, which of course also identifies whose ideas are excluded. Project 2025 is exclusively the product of the very conservative viewpoint in American culture and politics. The 922 pages of content purport to be the collective input of individuals associated with conservative think tanks. It's clear that the primary creator, organizer, and producer of the document is the Heritage Foundation, which provided its first manifesto of this type at the outset of the Reagan administration, and They purport to have been the catalyst to align the Reagan administration with the ideas of what the document calls the fledgling Heritage Foundation. Now, a review of history suggests that the Heritage Foundation was a direct outgrowth of the John Birch Society and similar organizations. And I'm going to look into some groups right now that purport to be the source, the kind of organization that generated Project 2025. And I'm certainly not going to name them all, but the idea is if you want to look at some of these organizations, including looking at their own websites outside of this document, you'll see the consistency of ideas. Some of the organizations are the Alabama Policy Institute, Alliance Defending Freedom, the American Conservative, the America First Legal Foundation, the American Cornerstone Institute. I'm skipping over various ones that are listed as either contributors or members of the advisory board. The First Liberty Institute, Foundation for Defense of Democracies, which is a curious name indeed, Foundation for Government Accountability, the Heritage Foundation, Hillsdale College, Honest Elections Project, and there's multiple more of these organizations of this particular kind of conservative, at least they would use the term conservative, I would say in most cases, pretty far right-wing organizations in terms of their philosophies and beliefs. But you have to go look at their own website. You can't just look at Project 2025 and decide that you know what the belief systems are for all these groups, because it's just a part of it. It's not all of it. They name also the authors, and a lot of the authors of the organization are simply members of the Heritage Foundation or one of the other conservative think tanks, and most of them are associated with some type of what I would characterize, I think a lot of people would, as right-wing belief systems and philosophies about government. And there are, I'd say, a couple dozen of these names that are listed as authors. Now, the primary author, the one who is given credit as being the progenitor, is Kevin D. Roberts, Ph.D. I would suggest, if anyone wants to understand some of the underlying belief systems of Project 2025, one needs to seek out information on Kevin D. Roberts. Having listed some of that, though, one of the things that's crucial, and I believe it is crucial, is to understand where things have come from. Who invented them? Who thought them up? Who did they come from? And what are the notions or ideas of the people who put this publication out for all of us to read and said this is the way America ought to run? Accordingly, I believe one can say without fear of contradiction that Project 2025 is the exclusive product a very conservative right-wing viewpoint to the complete exclusion of the centrist or progressive left-wing viewpoint. The document contains openly hostile language when referring to Obama, Biden, Harris administrations, and lavish praise on any reference to the Trump administration. Considerable effort and space are extended to denigrate Merrick Garland personally and the Department of Justice and other federal agencies. Think about that, because it's always been my belief that if a document purports to be a scholarly document, that is, it purports to address overriding issues or seeks to be respected as a template for the direction of an entity over time, in this case the government of the United States, then it reduces the underlying credibility and value of such a document. It absolutely does if it degenerates into nothing more than a puff piece for one current politician or a global criticism of other current politicians. This observation seems particularly accurate when the document assigns all correct thinking and policy to one side of the debate and assigns malevolence, actually, and ignorance to all statements and actions of those who espouse different views. Now, as I've begun to read through the massive content of this document, remember it's 922 pages all put together, but as I have begun to read through the massive content of it, I get the following impression. The cornerstone idea that seems to form the common thread regarding what is good and just and true in the judgment of the Heritage Foundation and the associated authors and contributors is a nostalgic desire to return to an America of the 1950s, after World War II and before the massive social revolution of the 60s and the technological revolution since. The document is framed in terms of governmental structure and restructure of power. That's the way it's written by agency names and other things. So it's structured in that regard and set up that way based on notions, I guess, that if you change the labor laws, you accomplish the goals. So it's framed in those kind of structures, but it uses the name of freedom and patriotism and talks about the restructure of power and control. But it seems to actually advocate for a redistribution of power into what are deemed trustworthy hands, rather than a real argument for freedom or limited government. So think about that for a minute. It's not really, as I can so far define it, understand it, it's not really what it purports to be, a conservative view of government, limited government, the original GOP idea. It's really not that. It's for a redistribution of power into what are deemed by the Heritage Foundation and these other authors to be trustworthy hands. And some of the positions they take support that idea. Now, this view is clearly nostalgic and deemed desirable and the, quote, right way for things to be for those who benefited from the way things were. It seems that the underlying call of the document, at least the portions I have read so far, is an effort to have the reader support and work towards a political and social structure around the traditional Norman Rockwell kind of family. Some of you may be too young to know what that is, but that was an artist in the 50s that did a lot of paintings about the normal family, the traditional family, and so forth. Also, a society where religion is practiced only in the fundamentalist Christian tradition, which problematically goes against the constitutional provisions of separation of church and state, but it still seems nonetheless that the ultimate result of the implementation of some of these policies would do that. Also, my view, after reading what I've read so far, is that women are subjugated into role assignments which preserve the white male-dominated society. Now, that's not said in that way. It's said in terms of governmental restructure. But it goes with the belief systems of the authors and the people who do this, or who wrote this, or who contributed, I guess, to it and support it. There are calls in the document for elimination or restrictions on labor unions and federal agencies created to level the playing field as between capital and labor. Economically, the document appears to advocate sufficient restructure of the federal government as necessary to return to a period of unfettered and unrestricted capitalism with no guardrails, such as existed at the outset of the Industrial Revolution, which produced such results as child labor, company stores, black lung disease, and other abuses of the American worker. It's more or less this. if you read Project 2025 and its advocated positions regarding labor and federal laws associated with labor management relationships, being a homeboy from Texas, I get what comes to my mind is the old phrase, they kind of want the coyote to guard the chicken house. And that's how this is going to happen. The way that the structure is proposed by the Heritage Foundation and the authors associated with it, most guardrails, most protections that currently operate, at least at some level, to protect the American worker, for example, from abuses by unfettered and unrestrained capitalism, include things like the National Labor Relations Board, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and other agencies formulated through federal statutes. If you read Project 2025, it would suggest a radical change in the applicability of those agencies, or in some cases, just downright abolition of these federal agencies. The argument for this arrangement, interestingly, is couched in the document as providing the worker with freedom. I take it freedom from labor unions or freedom from restrictions and OSHA regulations or whatever it is, but it's couched in terms of freedom. One can look at history to see how that played out for the worker in the past. As previously stated, we at No Hate Radio are fully aware that media outlets with large staffs and access to nationally recognized speakers will likely delve into the 922 pages with particularity. But we planned one more session, including a discussion of some specifics of Project 2025, as we continue to follow our theme of addressing issues or situations with our proverbial question of why and what are we going to do about it. We believe it is incumbent on all of us, everybody that's going to vote, everybody that knows somebody that's going to vote, all of us, to know and understand the facts before us as we vote and support candidates or not, possibly more importantly than at any time in the past. That's a big statement, more important than any time in the past. Maybe I could be overruled on that, the presidential election of 1860, maybe. But beyond that, I'd say that this is probably as pivotal a time as America has ever seen, and I think it's important then that we step out of our regular lives and really evaluate, really understand the issues that are out there and the positions that are being taken so that we know individually what we want to say about it. At least one candidate has openly praised Project 2025 as good work. Accordingly, we should be able to ascertain what that candidate sees as good work and the way to go. As always, please send us an email from our website or call or leave a message if there are any things you'd like to see addressed on No Hate Radio, such as what we're doing right now with Project 2025. Remember, it's nohateradio.com, and it's 442-4-NO-HATE for a phone number. We have a lot of issues to yet discuss on the political landscape in America, but it's worthy of note as we close out today. I'm not going to just continue these cases or sessions where I do all the talking. It's not that I've abandoned the idea of guest speakers at all. I want to start back to having guest speakers, but as we launch into this particular segment, it seems to require that there be a background around the notion of the political landscape in America so that we know what the next speaker might want to talk about. And as the facilitator for No Hate Radio and someone who catches and stays pretty current with current events, the speed at which those events have been changing in the last literally 3 weeks tell me that if we had booked some speakers 30 days ago, we would be talking about vastly different subjects. So our notion now is we are continuing on the series of the American political landscape. As I said, we're going to try to build some more analysis of Project 2025 into the next discussions we have, along with other subjects, and move forward from there. We strongly encourage you to give your input to us. In fact, this evaluation of 2025 came from a listener's request or a listener's suggestion, someone who said this is something that you ought to look into or you ought to talk about on No Hate Radio. So that's what we're doing, and we want to do that some more. Hopefully we will, as a nation, come together and find what most Americans believe, I hope, is the right way to go forward in America and the right way to run this country in the right directions to travel. But I don't think we can do that, and I don't think we can say that we're going to do that unless each of us individually really spends the time to concern ourselves with those things out there. A lot of people I've talked to lately say, well, I'm just tired. I'm very tired of politics. I'm tired of the division. I'm tired of the hatred. I'm tired of the constant barrage of degradation and insults and so forth. And I say to that, it's a good thing to be tired of that, and yet on the other hand, it's obligatory to participate and make that decision. Let's try very hard to not have to say after this election that we're no strangers to the rain. This is No Hate Radio.